every single theft that takes place will now be investigated by the police after a demand from the Home Secretary. Suella Braverman wants officers to use evidence from smart doorbells and dashcams to solve more lower-level crimes, admitting that criminals are currently free to break certain laws.
But there are concerns that there isn't the police capacity to do so, with warnings that the new approach could take resources away from more serious crimes like rape and sexual assault. Well, joining us now is Donna Jones, Chair of the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners. Thank you for joining us, Donna. So, if the police are to investigate every single theft, what on earth were they doing until now?
Well, there is a slight nuance here. It's not every single theft. It's every single theft where there is a line of inquiry to follow. And of course, in some crimes, there just is no lines to follow. So it is those, as you just said, where there are ring doorbells, where there are door cams, where there are CCTV footage from bikes, buses, and those sorts of things. Bikes, high-value street bikes that have got serial numbers on them. And what the Home Secretary is really saying is look, to Chief Constables and to Police and Crime Commissioners I appreciate that during austerity, the number of police officers in the UK dropped. But now we've got 20,000 extra police officers. It's only right on behalf of taxpayers and on behalf of victims of crime that the medium and lower level crimes are investigated again, because actually Chief Constables had opted to investigate the highest impact crimes only when the number of officers has been reduced over the last 10 years.
And she's right. She's absolutely right about low-level crime. We know that if you stamp that out, you can stamp out more crime. For example, if you have more police on the streets, you reduce violent crime. The figures are woeful. I was looking up. In terms of vehicle thefts and cycle thefts, 2% are charged. Burglary, 4%. Mugging, 6.5%. It's terrible, considering we live in such a surveillance society. I believe we have more cameras in this country than any other country in Europe per square mile. What's going wrong?
Well, I think what we really need to be doing now that she's made this policy pledge is that we need to be verifying those where there are lines of inquiry to follow and those that aren't. So let's say, for example, there are 52,000 incidents of theft a year of bikes, motorbikes, mopeds, cars, those sorts of things. What we then need to do is to judge police forces and chief constables on those where there is evidence that should have been followed and looked into. Let's say that happened to be 30,000, and then you judge their success rate on that rather than taking the whole number, because if someone's wing mirror was kicked off, for example, in the middle of the night and there is no CCTV and there is nothing to link it, no DNA or anything like that, then there is nowhere the police can go in terms of that investigation. But I do think it's right and proper. The Home Secretary says 20,000 more cops. We're hoping there is more to come as well, that actually now we want Police and Crime Commissioners to make sure that Chief Constables and police forces are investigating the crimes that happen in the volume and those that affect the most people. And I stick up for victims on that one, and I agree with it.
And Donna, won't this lead to a kind of two-tier system whereby people who are wealthy enough to have, say, your Ring doorbells or have CCTV installed on their homes are going to have their crimes looked into, whereas people who don't, and perhaps there is a very real prospect of those other crimes being solved, but the police just won't look into it because of the amount of paperwork involved?
Well, I think that's a really good point, actually. And we do need to make sure that people that particularly live in high-rise blocks or, let's say, perhaps in social housing, if they can't afford a Ring doorbell. But what I would say to them is get in contact with your police commissioner, get in contact with your police force, because, for example, in my area, in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, I pay a charity called the Blue Lamp Trust, who go out and will fit a Ring doorbell for you free of charge, particularly if you have been a victim of robbery, burglary, whether it be an outbuilding or your main residential property. So there is help and support out there. Police forces are also asking for people to come forward and register their Ring doorbells. So if there has been a hit and run in the street, or perhaps a nasty, incident of serious violence, as you just referenced, or a theft, that they can look on a database and see which houses in that street have a Ring doorbell, because it really helps to speed up their investigative process as well.
What a great idea.
And how much of this is politically motivated? Clearly, a general election is coming up. Crime, policing will be high on the agenda. Also, I was just reading another thing here. Not a single vehicle, bike or personal theft has been solved by police in half to two-thirds of neighbourhoods in England for the past 3 years. Now, the government is going to be judged on a number of things, Rishi Sunak's pledges, for example, but also on crime. People feel very strongly about this. How much of this is electioneering?
Well, Suella became the Home Secretary in September 1st last year for a few weeks, and then again in October when she was reappointed by the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, as you've just said. She is a Hampshire MP, so I've known her for well over 10 years. And actually, one of the things I did do with her when she became Home Secretary last year was sit down and talk to her about this high harm crime forces. Chief constables, you'd taken an operational decision that they could only respond to high harm crime. And I thought it was a travesty. And that actually, like you say, broken window effect, deal with those lesser crimes, and you perhaps prevent the organised crime gang members of the future of the next 3 to 5 years. So she does listen. She takes it really seriously. She's been working on some of these policies for a long time. In terms of the electioneering, yes, of course, we're hearing policies come out of both the Conservative Party and the Labour Party in preparation for the general election that we are all anticipating next year.
When it comes to burglary and theft, do we actually know the true scale of the problem? Because so many people who call the show, etc., say that they just won't bother to report a burglary or theft because they just don't have that trust that the police will even look into it.
Or just to add to that, they do it because they want a crime reference number, and therefore the insurance then kicks in.
Yeah, and this is what she's saying today is all about. When you've got break-ins from a shed or a garage, often that is not counted by the police force as a domestic burglary. That is counted as an outbuilding theft. Where it is in your dwelling, in your home, flat, house, whatever it may be, it then counts as a residential dwelling. Now, there was some tightening up of these rules in September last year, and a pledge made that every police force must attend 100% of residential burglaries. What we know with people who commit these kind of offences is that very often they have Class A drug addictions and or very, very severe alcoholic problems. And so by tackling and catching burglars, you are often also then preventing shoplifting offences and other things. And when there is a spate of burglaries in a neighbourhood, very often the police can look at the records of people that have just come out of their local prison and can very easily identify who they think it could be. Very often is then a case of tracking the evidence back to whoever they think the suspects are.
Let's move on, if we can, and talk about this terrible security breach at the Metropolitan Police. This is where the records were leaked. This is highly confidential data about the names, ranks, photos, the vetting levels, the pay grades of these Metropolitan Police officers, endangering the officers themselves. Why on earth, when you've been warned, which they were, about outsourcing things like this to private companies, why on earth would they go through and outsource this kind of stuff where this data is confidential and any leak then endangers officers?
Yeah, this is a really worrying breach of 40,007 bits of potential data getting into the hands of the wrong people, as you've just said. Potentially also police officers who are working undercover, covert. Some of them will be based within organised crime gangs, so literally putting their lives at risk. It is a real concern. What we should say, though, is that it's not confirmed at the moment that that data has got into the wrong hands. It has been confirmed that there has been a data breach. So someone has accessed it, but we don't know who at the moment. And that obviously needs to come out. Now, in terms of answering your question as to why these things are outsourced, well, I mean, look, the Metropolitan Police Service is the size of 5 other average-sized police forces. So it has many complexities due to its size and nature. They have struggled where many other forces haven't to recruit their police uplift number, those additional police officers the government paid for over the last 3 years. When you are recruiting a mass number of police officers in one go, you then have to vet them. You have to put them through their fast driver blue light training. There's so many other infrastructure things behind the scenes. Now, what clearly the Met have done is outsource the vetting and the issuing of the collar number and the security pass that you get when you are sworn in as a police officer to a third sector company to speed up that. Often it is a cheaper way of doing it.
But is it good enough? I mean, it may be cheaper, but actually it's putting the lives of these officers in danger, 47,000 of them.
Yes, well, I can't answer the questions about the Met because that's not my force. All I can say to you is that's the reason why they would have done it. I'm pretty sure of that. But clearly things do need to be looked into. We had a data breach in the Police Service of Northern Ireland, PSNI, just 3 weeks ago. There have been other breaches and other forces in England as well. And actually, this data is absolutely sacrosanct. As I've just said, people's lives are at risk. People are putting their lives on the line to serve the king and country and to keep us all safe. And so there has to be a review done, and I know the Home Office are looking at that at the moment.
Donna, really good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. That's Donna Jones there. Coming up.